Razani with Digital CxO. I'm excited to be here with Manish Malhotra. He is the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Data Science for SessionAI. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Amanda.
Glad you're on the show. So can you share a little bit about your background and experience and SessionAI?
Sure. Let's start with the company. SessionAI is a new type of marketing platform. We call it in-session marketing, which is basically aimed towards helping brands solve the problem, the challenge of anonymous site visitors. How do you convert them into customers when you know very little about them? I am a co-founder at the company, and I head the business strategy as well as data science operations.
Wonderful. So when it comes to e-commerce, how important is that customer experience for businesses?
Well, I think the last sort of decade has certainly, told us that it's paramount. The fact that during COVID, which was a big upheaval, e-commerce grew, is sort of a testament to the need, the inherent demand, if you will, that customers seek for convenience and really the ability of the brands to essentially meet that convenience, both in terms of the shopping experience as well as in terms of the gratification of getting the products on time when the customer needs them. Well, really, I was talking to, one of the leaders at Abercrombie and Fitch not very long ago. And, brands like Abercrombie have seen tremendous movement, to e-commerce. So these are brick and mortar retailers who've been around for significant amount of time that have essentially seen their e-commerce business grow up. It's now upwards of 50% of the overall business is coming from e-commerce. So really, if you take a sort of a step back and say, wow, that is pretty significant. We've grown up from 15% to 20% to now 55%, of the business. So clearly, digital experiences are crucial, in terms of sort of really where we stand and how we go forward.
I've even seen that is significant. And I've even seen some companies that have literally closed their brick and mortar locations and are completely online.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, I come from India and, there's sort of a movement there to mobile banking, mobile apps. There were brands in retail that essentially shut down their stores about 8 years ago, and they were perhaps a little too early, but I think we're reaching that tipping point here in the US as well as globally. I think the movement towards frictionless commerce, a better experience is undeniable. I think customers wanted, brands, our ability to sort of like as brands, as vendors, is sort of also continuously improving. That's, advances in technology.
I know even me as a customer, I'm expecting to be able to get what I want on the fly very efficiently and easily from my phone or online. So it's very important, I think, for that being said, for businesses to understand how they can better harness the data from customers online. How can they use the data to understand the customers and improve their revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I want to perhaps reflect on that question, sort of really thinking about forces of change. I think the first one you already sort of mentioned in terms of on the demand side, what are customer expectations? So we've talked about that. I think the second part is more regulatory. We've seen over the last, perhaps 5 years, 2018 is when, Safari first implemented controls on user data. And Apple sort of has been, progressively, getting better with their privacy controls and has done multiple releases since then, not just on Safari browsers, but also on iOS and the operating systems in general. And sure enough, some of that is in response to the regulatory changes, the environment, and privacy overall. Third-party tracking of user data is going away. It's not gone away today, but it's on its way. Obviously, the implementations from Google are not there as yet, and that's essentially what sort of needs to happen. But third-party tracking is going away. First-party data tracking, which is pretty kosher. I mean, this is, customers saying you can service me and essentially look at what I'm doing on the site in response to which you can service me better. First-party data tracking is getting harder. We don't talk about this as much, but essentially repeat visitors to the same site beyond a week, essentially don't really have browsers today don't really allow you to track that repetitive visit and really connect it to a previous visit. So really, from a privacy perspective, and consumers are okay with this. Consumers are essentially, sort of leaning into privacy even as they want better experiences. So, to your question, I think it's a critical gap that seems to be sort of really growing, and as soon as some of the implementations in Chrome and Android come to market, this is going to get harder and harder. Brands are having difficulties collecting data and attributing data to the same visitor. A recent report that we did at SessionAI, which was based on a survey of a large number of retailers, we call it it's an annual in-session marketing, state of marketing, found that 90% of site traffic is anonymous. And this is, grown. This poses a challenge for brands to do personalization. When 90% of your visitors are unknown, that's a challenge. It also poses, of course, a challenge to their conversion strategies. How do you engage? How do you convert this large proportion of traffic on your site that you've essentially, sort of really paid to acquire, and you continue to pay repeatedly because acquisition on the other side is sort of really also getting, inefficient as well as expensive. So those are some thoughts really from the, I think the brands that we speak to, the retailers that we sort of are engaged with, we hear that all the time.
So how can we, there's a lot of new technology and it's rapidly expanding. How can businesses harness the new technology? What kind of technology should they be looking at? I know there's AI and machine learning. How can we utilize those in these digital transformation initiatives to improve and up level?
Yeah. Again, it's a wonderful question. I want to reflect on, so technology needs to service a need. And so what is this need here first? Let's sort of really, crystallize that, if you will. So we've established that, it's getting harder to acquire traffic. It's getting more expensive to acquire traffic. Why? Because of, the tracking sort of third-party cookies and users through that data transfer essentially getting harder. It's also getting sort of tougher to retarget, people once they've come to your site and essentially after you. So you have a challenge on acquisition, but you also have a challenge on retargeting or reacquisition, if you will. So that essentially says, that we have to take a fresh look at what's happening between the time somebody comes to the site or the app and before they go away. That window of opportunity is what we really think about as in-session. And so that's the motivation for in-session marketing. Now, technology, of course, plays a big role here because one would say that with that sort of really, window of opportunity, the data points perhaps may not be that many. You're looking at understanding the behavior of visitors within the first few clicks to be able to sort of really service their needs. Now, seemingly, that's not enough. But if you, again, take a look at where technology is, the state of machine learning and, artificial intelligence, the advances there over the last several years have actually shown, and we've been doing this for about 5 years ourselves at SessionAI, that within the first 5 clicks, it's possible to predict with very strong fidelity each visitor's intent to purchase within that visit. And if you can do that well, then there's sort of a plethora of, actions and opportunities to intervene and influence and service that particular visitor that opens up. Again, it's important to remember that we're really talking about using information that is essentially based on the activity of these visitors, not who they are, and certainly not based on, their demographics, sociographics, or third-party data that you might be sort of acquiring or thinking about acquiring. You don't need those data points. We're just talking about what we call as in-session data.
So that brings up a good point. Utilizing that data to know what the majority of customers are wanting to purchase, what were they considering, that's certainly helpful. But then with the customers whom we don't have any of that information and we don't have their contact information, what is the solution there? How can we use tools and technology to perhaps persuade customers that are online to share their information before leaving the site? Just because I know that can be really critical when they have data. I know for me, I will go and I'll put some things in the shopping cart, for example, let's say Amazon, and I'll put some things in the shopping cart. And then I will leave and I will get busy, and I may or may not remember, or might change my mind. But then I will very quickly get an email reminding me, hey, we saw that you have these things in the shopping cart. Would you like to go back online? Here's some other suggestions for you. And often that really does work. I will get back online and I will make the purchase. So what are your solutions in regard to this?
Yeah. It's a really important question because, again, technology to surface insights is only part of the solution. We have to be able to take what we call as real-time in-session actions. And, the way I think about this, Amanda, is the purpose of in-session marketing is to improve conversions and reduce drop-offs before they happen. So to your point, that email that is sent out is after it happens, and that will continue to play a role. However, as you said, that email can only go out for known visitors on whom you have an email. But remember, 90% of the traffic is anonymous and probably not coming back, or if they're coming back, it's going to be harder and more expensive to get them back there on the site. So what do you do for them? Well, in-session marketing, applies real-time tactics to address all active users on the site using the intelligence, these propensities that you've determined. What are some of those actions? I think those actions can be certainly promotions, which are very targeted. So think about, understanding your highly likely buyers, your unlikely buyers, and people who are in the middle. We call them as on the fence, visitors. The opportunity now within session marketing is to do targeted promotions that can influence the on the fence audience while that audience is still on the site before they go away, to essentially get them over that fence, over that sort of, hesitation. How do you do that? Well, of course, incentives work. But there are other ways to sort of intervene as well, establishing perhaps the uniqueness and the differentiation of the brands you carry. Perhaps the service, going back to that, opening question about, what is it that, let's say if you're a Zappos, well, returns are easy. Returns are possible anytime. Returns are without questions. Well, there's, really a lot of value propositions that, every brand has, that it's time to surface that for first-time buyers or for repeat visitors who haven't bought in some time. Those are the opportunities, to sort of really take real-time in-session actions.
Can we talk about some of the newer trends in e-commerce? And maybe not new, but they are more improved. I know one thing I see more than ever is in real-time chatbots. They seem to be much more advanced these days, and there may be some that I'm not thinking about. So can you share with that?
Yeah, I think just wonderful progress, overall, sort of really in the chat space, everything's chat GPT. And for a good reason. I've been playing around with that, and I think it's wonderful in terms of the advancement of generative AI and really the maturity to which it has come. The underlying technology here is something that's about 4 or 5 years old. It's based on something called transformers, but large language models have this uncanny ability to have a conversation and to sort of really, hold that conversation based on the context of what is being sort of like what is evolving, really topically within that conversation. And when you think about sort of that relevant contextual data, that is the basis, if you will, of these learning algorithms that are able to sort of really look at contextually, what is it that the current question or prompt is, and what is it that it's sort of really based off of one, two, maybe even three prompts prior. You don't even have to specify what you're asking about, sort of like in full detail. It's very different from search engines, if you will, where every interaction is sort of a new context. When it comes to the kind of work that we're doing at SessionAI in terms of using in-session intelligence, which is not necessarily generative, it's based on sequence analysis, but we think about it in very similar terms. The context of micro behaviors that are being expressed on every single page view, on every single click, is additive and cumulative, and I think that's sort of the essence of doing predictions at 5 clicks, because it's not just the 5th click, it is every click matters, and therefore the session matters. So I hope that gives you an idea of really some of these very visible advancements, based on ChatGPT, that essentially are leveraging context through some very key underlying technology advancements, these transformers, very similar things that we're doing in terms of these learning models based on sequence analysis.
Wonderful. So last question, looking ahead the next 5 years, what's the next big thing that you think needs to be focused on when it comes to e-commerce?
Gosh, that's a great question, and I wish I knew the answer. Oh gosh. Let me just again go back and think about sort of that forces of change, because, as digital leaders, I think we really have to sort of really take care of the present, worry a little bit about the future, and certainly plan for it, in ways that I think we can put our arms around. Budgets are always going to be tough. Budgets are always going to be sort of really, there are multiple sort of projects, initiatives that are contending, for limited budgets and limited resources. Obviously, from our standpoint, we believe that the session is a new focus, for marketing and for e-commerce. We've done this in the past in some ways, but I think those have been really just the stepping stones to where we are today. I think the next few years, we're going to see acceleration. We're going to see this convergence between what we think about as customer intelligence or visitor intelligence, and then content intelligence, generative sort of content that's, really happening on the other side. And there's going to be this convergence where context is based on content, but it's also based on the activity of the user. And so really, if you think about it in those terms, there is this significant convergence of technology and advances in technology that I think are really going to go back and give us brand new use cases. So what do we do today? Well, I think we have to sort of really play in both courts. I think we have to sort of really think about in-session, customer intelligence, customer AI as one sort of pillar of this, investments that we look forward into. And then the other part is the content and what, sort of content are these visitors, that these customers interacting with, and therefore how sort of that can dynamically be updated, changed, and so on. And that is all generative AI, which is, sort of in the realm of ChatGPT. So I would say that, look, as leaders, digital leaders, we need to sort of really think about the customer, the visitor, the content, and I think really make sort of attempts to move forward on both fronts. I think that convergence is what's ahead of us.
Looking at that whole picture.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I know I've learned a lot. I'm sure our audience has too, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you, Amanda. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.